podcast includes commentary and conversations about issues relevant to clinical psychology. It is intended to educate, entertain, and enlighten, and is not a substitute for actual mental health treatment. Individuals who share personally here choose willingly to tell their stories to benefit you, the listener. All other references to clinical situations are altered or limited to protect confidentiality. For more specific questions or help with a personal situation, please consult a local mental health professional. Therapy, mental health, real life. This is Psych Rally with Los Angeles-based clinical psychologist Dr. Martin Hsia.
All right, welcome back for episode 12 of Psych Rally. With me here today is a special friend of mine, Emily Wu Truong. She is a extremely active, visible activist and motivational speaker, as well as mental health advocate. I don't know how much time I can put into mentioning all her accolades, but I'll just say she's the vice president, right, of multicultural outreach for the National Alliance on Mental Illness, or NAMI, with the San Gabriel Valley chapter here, or San Gabriel Valley affiliate, and also chairs the Asian Coalition in collaboration with the LA County Department of Mental Health. She's the spokesperson for Each Mind Matters, which is a pro-mental health movement in the state of California, and is involved with a number of movements and programs about mental health, suicide prevention, etc. And most notably last year, she was awarded the Woman of the Year in 2015 by Senator Ed Hernandez, who I've met, by the way. So congratulations.
Thank you.
She's Emily Wu Truong. Emily, thanks for chatting with me today.
I'm glad to be here.
Yes, you and I have a lot of similar interests and some similar background, not just because we come from similar places, maybe different family stories. But and what I would say about you is, I always joke about this, that she's the last person that shows up in my Facebook newsfeed before I go to bed. And then the first person, I swear, when I wake up. So you are very active on social media. You're often known as the Lady in Green. Why green?
So many people know that the pink ribbon stands for breast cancer. So the lime green ribbon stands for mental health awareness. And so instead of always wearing the lime green ribbon, I like to wear lime green clothing.
I suppose you could wear ribbon as part of the whole ensemble too.
Yes.
Yeah. I see. And which always surprises me when sometimes I see you post a photo of yourself wearing black or another color other than green, but I suppose later we can talk about why there's variation in your spectrum.
Sure.
But so you are, what's the saying, wearing your passion as your fashion? Yes. Okay. Say just maybe a brief overview of what it is that you have been up to and what you're doing as a speaker and advocate.
So in the last 3 years, I've definitely accumulated so many different types of speaking engagements through the Asian Coalition, through NAMI, and I've been able to go to high schools, go to colleges, go to speak with law enforcement, school administrators, teachers. It's just so many types of audiences in order to bring awareness to mental health, and because so many people are scared about talking about it, that it's like such a stigmatized subject. But I try and tell my story wherever I go in order to normalize the subject.
Sure.
And say that, yes, this may be my story, but I'm also speaking out on behalf of many stories that are not told.
Yeah.
And so I kind of think of it as, me telling the story of the younger generation when I didn't feel like I had a voice when I was a young child. Now that I'm much older, I have learned to value my voice.
Sure.
And I speak out for the little Emily inside me. And I just go out and speak wherever I can. And it's been a very enjoyable experience.
Good. And we can talk a little bit about some of the feedback you've gotten and places you've been able to reach. You mentioned the little Emily. So to my knowledge, you grew up in Arkansas, and your family moved here to San Marino, California when you were 7, 6?
I was born in 81, and I moved over here in 88, so 88 minus 81 is 7, yes.
Now, one might think that being of Asian American or Taiwanese American background, that would be a very easy move. You know, Arkansas is, there's not a lot of Asian faces, Asian families there, and you come to San Marino and you fit in perfectly on the outside. But that was not necessarily the case. Tell us about your experience with that move.
Well, if anyone's watched the Disney movie of Inside Out,
yes,
I think a lot of people will be able to understand a child's hard transition from moving from one place to another.
Yeah.
And in that case, that was my story, and I had a hard time, finding people that I got along with. When kids are small, they'll say things like, "Oh, best friends forever," but is that really true? And so,
how many changes happen from year to year when you're kids? Like, you really know what you're talking about,
right?
Yeah,
right. And so it was just, I faced bullying, and the hardships just made me feel like I wish our family never moved. And I would have so many dreams about my old friends in Arkansas, and but I'd never see them again. And so that's what made the transition from Arkansas to California hard too.
Regardless of the cultural milieu, if you will.
Well, the environment of Los Angeles can be quite materialistic, and so when I was young, I knew that money could not buy happiness, and so that's what made trying to fit in difficult, because I wanted to talk about the meaning of life.
These are deep questions for a young girl.
Yes.
But at some level, perhaps they were brought on by having gone through such a big transition, and not feeling there was, as you've said before, maybe the support to think about it or other people to talk about it with.
Right.
Yeah, and other people that you're getting to know in a new school hadn't necessarily gone through that yet, so they couldn't really relate.
Yeah, a lot of my friends were more used to talking about stuff, gossip, and just things that were trendy. But when I wanted to talk about more meaningful things like relationships, boys,
Oh, boys.
Yeah. But they're just it was hard to connect.
It perhaps didn't feel as meaningful, or
No.
just didn't connect with what you wanted.
No, it wasn't. And I mean, that's why sometimes it can be difficult for the young generation. Everyone wants to be loved, accepted, but it's hard to find those true friendships where you feel like you definitely connect heart to heart with.
Well, and for younger kids, it's so much just about learning how to behave, learning how to fit in, and you find what you're good at academically, athletically, musically, whatever it is. And to some extent that's appropriate, but that's, when you feel like you don't have your place or your group or even one meaningful connection, that's, everything else can feel that much harder, yeah?
Yeah, most definitely. Yeah, it's hard to navigate the young life, especially if you don't have a confidant or a mentor. And, when I was growing up, I definitely didn't feel like I had a mentor. And I mean, I know that there were teachers here and there, and they can only do so much for you. But, just feeling like you have that, best friend / mentor who could show you the ropes. But and it can definitely feel like that, a lonely experience without that type of person. But I'm just glad I made it through and I'm still alive today.
Here you are, yes.
Yeah.
For people here in the LA area, specifically in the San Gabriel Valley, and definitely within the Asian American community in California, people might know what San Marino is known for, but for someone who doesn't know sort of the reputation, at least, of San Marino and its culture, say a little bit about it.
Well, the way I would describe San Marino, many people call it the Golden Bubble. It is a affluent, wealthier neighborhood of the San Gabriel Valley, sometimes compared to Beverly Hills sometimes. And there's a lot of Asians in this community. I would say that maybe the San Marino Unified School District, it could be possibly 75% Asian now.
Yeah.
And when I came to, from Arkansas to California, in Arkansas, we were one of 3 Asian families in our small town. And when we moved to San Marino, it was like, whoa, everyone is Asian. And then there's the white kids, and then there's a few minorities, but I just
in most
felt,
other places, you would have been a minority.
Yeah.
This is one of the few places
Right.
you were in the majority.
Right. Yeah. But there was a lot of pressure because of the academic pressure. San Marino is considered one of the highest API academic performing index scores of the entire state of California. So they like their reputation of being, high on that list.
Right. Well, and you throw in Asian culture and its, emphasis on education, and these are, well-to-do, successful Asians, for the most part. So all that mixed together can lead to a lot of pressure. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. How would you say that shaped you or affected you?
So I have 2 older siblings. My brother is 8 years older, and he got the straight A's. He was the model child, and my parents were really happy with him. He was first violin for PYMO, the Pasadena Youth Symphony Orchestra or something. My sister was a straight A student until high school. And then, for me, was I ever a straight A student? Nah.
Then there was you? Aww.
Yeah, and because I remember as far back as elementary school where I'd show my mom my report card, and when it wasn't an A, my mom wasn't happy, and to the point where I remember even in high school I'd forge my parents' signatures.
Oh, really?
When I would get like a C or D in my math class.
That's the worst class to get a C or D in, too.
Yeah, it was trigonometry.
Oh, man.
I hated that class.
Clearly.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
So not all Asians are good at math.
Nope. Not all Asians are good at computers either. I won't mention any of their names.
Yeah.
So you've, we might not have time to get into as many details as I'd love to, but and you've told your stories in many different places, in many different settings, but you've talked about having dealt with anxiety, dealt with depression, faced some bullying, and feeling like you had to wrestle with seeking external validation. Say just a little bit about what that looked like at different times growing up and into young adulthood.
I think that when I was around my parents, I thought that receiving validation from them was, to see the look in their face when they are proud of you. Mm-hmm. And I felt like I never got that type of validation from them. And so my coping skill was trying to find friends, but then when I couldn't find friends, I got into relationships, and I tried to get my validation through those relationships, and
Didn't work too well that way, huh?
It's always a hit and miss, with friendships and relationships, but you learn and you grow through each experience, finding out what you like and don't like in friendships or in relationships. So, yeah.
Was there a darkest moment for you?
In college, there was this boy that I loved so much, and he had already broken up with me. And I loved him so much that I poured my heart into his. But when he didn't want to be with me, and I knew that he was sleeping with a neighbor 2 doors down from my home.
Ouch. Oh. That doesn't help.
I was so devastated and crying so much, and I wanted to choke myself that night, and I tried to, but I knew in the back of my mind that I couldn't do it, because I know that there are people who love me. And so those were some suicidal feelings I had in college.
Yeah, that was a real low point.
Right, because it's like I'm not getting the validation I want from the ex-boyfriend, but it's like putting all your eggs in one basket, and putting all your love into one person. But then, if you don't get it back, then it's like, how do you feel like you're somebody in the world? You just feel so worthless.
Yeah, and it's not important to get validation from other people and have support and care, but as you've said a number of times in a lot of the things I've heard you say, it's we have to have a base within ourselves too. So
it's very important.
Yeah.
Sometimes we actually need external validation in order to understand that we are already validated, and that we need to encourage ourselves by validating ourselves. Sometimes we don't think that we're a person of worth until someone else sees it, but we have to also realize it for ourselves.
And I think sometimes people will get a lot of external validation, but if they don't have an internal base for themselves, they can't even take that in. So it can kind of go both ways.
Yeah.
Leading up to a few years ago, I think is my understanding, is when you started really finding your voice and being active in the community and with NAMI, et cetera. Talk about that turning point or that transition.
So in July 2013, I was working at 2 part-time locations where I wasn't feeling validated. I knew I was doing a great job, but I wasn't getting the validation that I wanted. And so I came to a point where I'm like, I'm not going to work for them next year. Because if
you're just miserable in that job, huh?
Yeah, and it's just like, if you don't feel appreciated, just don't work for them, And it's not healthy to stay in a place where people don't appreciate you for your efforts, and especially if they're talking down to you and speaking in such a condescending way, that's workplace bullying.
Yeah.
And so I chose to remove myself from the job because my husband said, I want you to find a place where you enjoy the work, where you're happy. And there was an affirmation where it said, if you can't find your dream job, you have to create it. And so I had returned back to my old dream of becoming a motivational speaker. Martin Luther King Jr. was always an inspiration to me since junior high. And, he's a widely known motivational speaker.
For sure.
Because he would tell people that you're no less than anyone else. You're just equal as everyone else is. And so I wanted, I've always been wanting people to see their worth. I was so good at encouraging others growing up, and yet my greatest weakness was being able to encourage myself. And so, the 3 summers ago was the turning point of my transformation from understanding that I had my own worst enemy inside me. Because that voice would say, you are stupid, you are slow, and you're not worthy.
Yeah.
And that side of me finally said, wow, Emily, I'm so sorry I lied to you all your life. You are bright, intelligent, so talented, young woman, and I don't want to work against you anymore. I want to work for you.
Do you see that as the same voice having a change of heart, or a different voice talking back?
I think it was the same voice. And that voice was like the judgmental, condescending voice that was always in my head. And realizing, just like in such shock, because what had happened was I opened my 3rd grade diary, and I was looking at the way that I wrote and seeing how expressive little Emily was. And like, wow, like just like so stunned in amazement, like, wow,
What happened to that girl?
She's still here.
Yeah.
She's still inside me.
She's still inside you, but she wasn't able to spread her wings at all on that job, and had maybe been stamped out by that mean, critical voice, huh?
And I think part of it is just learning to believe in yourself, when for so long that you didn't. And because, so many people feel like they're broken and they're not worthy of unconditional love. But we are, and we have to accept that love, or else we will always feel broken. But we're not, our brokenness may make us feel broken, but we're not. They actually help us to become the phoenix rising. So, like spreading our wings and reaching our highest potential. If we don't dare ourselves to change and do better, we'll never learn to fly.
Agreed. So you took a dark moment and you turned it into, at least at that point, was a turning point, spreading your wings, refinding your voice, and channeled it towards something else. Put it that way, yeah?
Turning pain into something so beautiful for others to see, and help other people along the way, and say that your pain is making you stronger.
You sought some sort of mental health care at that time, at that low moment. Talk about that process.
Well, the process was quite difficult because while I was having a 3-day mental breakdown, I made over 60 phone calls to help me help myself.
Calls to who?
So, various hotlines, my insurance company, and it's like, I hate insurance companies because you can't talk to just one person. They have to transfer you to so many different people. And it's just like, I'm the type of person who wants to develop a relationship with somebody,
Sure.
But you can't do that over the phone with insurance companies. And even if you're using a cell phone, you get cut off, they won't call you back.
Nope.
So
Customer service is not their forte.
No. So, I mean, it's an emotional trigger sometimes, and I have to deal with that.
Yeah.
And And so, but, eventually I was able to find a sliding scale place where it was like $30 a session in Pasadena. So I was grateful for that. And, because the first sliding scale place I called, they said, based on your husband's income, it would cost you $125. And I'm like, I don't have a job. Why the heck would I even want to pay that amount of money? So I just couldn't justify it. Yeah.
You talked about, you were interviewed by Kings River Life, I saw, and you talked about a dark side coming out. Is that kind of the voice that came out during this period you had to deal with, or that triggered this, or?
It was kind of like, so the dark voice is like that, what I said earlier about the, you're stupid, you're slow, and you're not worthy. And it's like, these were the lies that I used to believe. They're the self-limiting thoughts, right? That stopped me from being able to see that I could have a life of potential. And, I call it the perfectionism. If you're not perfect, if you don't get it all right, then you're not good enough. And so I didn't realize growing up that I had those thoughts and myths in my mind, lies that stopped me from being able to be the best Emily she could be.
I imagine it's like, well, I'm not perfectionist. I got C's and D's sometimes, so maybe that's not my issue, but it can show up in a different kind of way. Yeah? That self-critical voice.
I was very harsh on myself. Like, after college, I moved back home and I was so depressed. And, my mom every day would ask me, like, when are you going to go back to school and get your master's? Or when are you going to get your full-time job? And so because she said that so much, the way I interpreted that was, I am only somebody if I have one of those two things.
That's your identity. That's your self-worth.
But if I don't have it, then you're a nobody. You're not someone who could contribute to society or could amount to anything, But that was false. I have always been a somebody. And I didn't always realize that for myself before. And so, but they have definitely been moments of learning more about who I am, and I didn't go through those experiences for nothing. Even though those moments were like, I felt like the victim and the oppressor, right? Because as the victim, I'm like, I'm a confused person, young adult who doesn't know what to do with my life. But then I'm also a perfectionist, so it stops me from being able to really open up, and I would isolate. And I was the oppressor because I was talking down to myself. Like,
you're both within yourself.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so I'd lay on the bed and don't know what to do with myself, and just, I think I remember when Y2K was coming around, they would say that the world was going to end. I was like, oh, I wish the world would end, like, go away, go. But the world didn't go.
I got to deal with this life somehow.
Yeah. So, yeah.
How has your family kind of responded to you being such a visible figure and open with some of your struggles?
Well, at first, my parents were not so open about me being that open because they also don't want to feel like they are to blame. However, when I opened up to the World Journal Chinese Daily News, they did not tell me what the name of the article would be, and it was in the English translation for the Chinese article was "Victim of Perfectionist Parents Speaks Out."
Yikes. If you'd been consulted, you might have revised that title?
Yes. However, there was a good and bad thing about it. So the bad thing was that, there was a lot of drama after the article was published. My mom said, like, how could you do this to me? Are you really my daughter? Do I have to disown you?
Yikes.
And this happened right before Thanksgiving and Christmas.
Perfect.
But there's a lot of drama within my family. But the good thing about the article was that it was so provoking that, you know how, like, when you go on YouTube and there's, like, so many good and bad comments, like,
Sure.
and it just provoked so many discussion, like, comments. It got, like, a lot of good positive and negative comments. Some people may have been said, like, oh, thank you, Emily, for speaking out. But then the other ones would be really negative and, like, saying, I don't know, like, just maybe a parent who is taking it personally. Like, what? You grew up in San Marino? Like, not even, like, kids in, I don't know, third world countries, like, have mental illness. I don't know. They're just making some weird random comments.
Well, what right do you have to be talking about this if you come from an affluent neighborhood?
Yeah. I mean, because people think that people in rich, affluent, wealthy neighborhoods don't have problems because they have money. That's not true.
You could say maybe the opposite is true sometimes.
Yeah. It's like mental health challenges, mental illness does not discriminate. It
Right.
happens in every community in different ways, and so the positive. You know how, like, Robin Williams died, right?
Yes.
It was so tragic, but it was also so positive because people would start talking about suicide and mental health and mental illness. And so that was the good thing out of him, his passing. And so in this article, the good part was that people were talking. The article probably reached over like 250,000 views worldwide.
And it reached your parents too.
Oh yeah, for sure, my parents.
Yes.
My parents are so embarrassed, but it led to a conversation where my parents said for the first time, "We're sorry, we're not perfect parents."
What was that like to hear?
Oh my gosh, I was so happy because that was like, to hear humility from your parents is like, wow.
From your Asian American parents too.
Yeah, and
yes.
they're pretty conservative, and they were born in Taiwan, and they're kind of like grown up being the type of kids who, you do as you're told, and that's how you respect your parents,
right?
So my mom would be like growing up like, why do I have to listen to you and my parents, like my grandparents, right? Like, that's not fair. Like, and it's just like, traditions change. It's just like, it's not about, like, yes, respect is important, but like, respect does not always mean obey.
Respect can be flexible and might look different
in a Western culture.
In a Western culture, in a different country, in a different context, and just generationally too.
Yeah. I was in a parent class one time, parenting class, just learning about parenting, and the instructor shared with our class, her daughter said something like, she said to her daughter, like, why are you talking back? And the daughter said, no, I'm advocating for myself.
Wow.
Yeah.
Quite a word.
And so
a little girl.
Yeah, and I was like, I didn't even learn the word advocate until after college.
Yeah. Good for her.
Yeah.
perfect segue as an advocate now. I know this from being your linked on social media. Every day you're at a different event in a different place, speaking, connecting with people. You're out there, you're sharing your story, you're busting stigma. I think that's awesome. I think that's bold. I think that's great. I know that can be underappreciated and underfunded, but give the audience like a snippet. What's like a week? What does a week look like in the life of Emily Wu Truong?
Wow. I mean, I have so many different roles because I'm still a homemaker. I also take care of my kitty. And so
Please.
she serves as my pet therapy. My husband named her Chairman Meow. So she's a shy kitty, and when I was a child, my thinking was like, oh, like humans are so mean. I like animals more, you know. But anyways, but yeah, I go to all sorts of meetings. We have I'm involved with NAMI, Asian Coalition. We actually have a meeting today, later at the Arcadia Mental Health Center. We always feature another speaker each month and something related to untold Asian stories from our community. And we call them profiles of hope and resilience.
Nice.
Where they'll tell their story about some situations that they've gone through in their life and telling us how they've overcome those situations of, like, for example, like a sister whose younger sister was who was killed, shot by law enforcement in our local community in a mental health clinic. You know, how distraught that situation can be, but she's also now a NAMI San Gabriel Valley board member.
Great.
Nancy Ang, and you know, who keeps on commemorating what she does now to continue raising awareness on mental health, mental illness in the community by helping other families. You know, just examples like her, who just, you know, taking that pain but trying to use it to do something productive.
Sure.
Right, is so important. You know, because there's so many frustrations we can complain about in this world, and you know, we can allow the insanity to get to us, but really we have to change that frustration and anger to something more positive so that it can be productive and help people in society.
Sure. You once told me the story about going back to your high school, San Marino High School. And I forget the details, but you had approached some folks in administration about telling your story or about talking about mental health issues. And we got a surprising reception, perhaps. Or maybe a not surprising reception, I don't know. But you share that story.
Well, when I was new at being an advocate for doing this type of work, I had just come from a meeting with Senator Ed Hernandez, health collaborative meeting, and I was just so excited. You know, I was introduced myself as the Erin Brockovich for mental health, you know, and then I just didn't think about the stigma that I would potentially receive if I was to open up. And so when I went to my high school in 2013 and 14, I did share my story. I shared several stories, even of me not being able to find affordable mental health care at the time. But I there was such stigma I received because a few weeks later I had found out that there was a post of my face at the school saying this woman is not welcome here.
Was it like a physical poster put on the wall? Or?
I think it was like maybe a piece of paper with my high school photo on it.
Wow.
And indicating my name, and it was only in the vice principal's office, and so it wasn't like posted all over the school. It was just in one location where even some of the teachers could see it. So
This was after you had been invited and actually spoken there, yeah?
no, it was actually I had gone there and I was just like visiting, because every now and then after I graduated from high school, I'd go back and I go visit my teachers, my peer counseling teacher, and my teacher who taught psychology. And so, I'd go back and to just say, hey, how are you? And kind of like, it was my way of indirectly saying thank you for being my teacher. And
you had some good people there. Yeah. Good relationships.
Because with my peer counseling teacher, he was kind of like that confidant I was telling you about. Like when a student needs someone to, they feel like they want that guidance, and it's like I couldn't turn to my parents because they don't know how to navigate this world for the youth, because their growing up experiences were in another country.
Right.
And so that's where we're trying to find someone else over here to help us like figure things out and bounce our ideas off of the older generation. And so, and I felt like it was okay to drop by after school. But
you're an alumnus, retain relationships with their fellow students, former students.
But then what ended up happening, was just felt so... I was so distraught when I heard that post existed at the school.
Yeah.
But the most, like, as distraught as it felt to know that it existed, and it felt like defamation, I turned it into something that would lead me to become a stronger mental health advocate, and to not let it, defeat me.
Sure. But
to empower me.
I'm glad you did.
I'm so glad I did too, because most people, I think people's most natural reaction would be like, oh no, and they may even stop, they don't want to do it anymore.
Right. If this is my own backyard, I went to school here too, and if I get this reception, how am I gonna be received in places where I'm complete outsider or not even known? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. You've developed some relationships through all your speaking and networking at a more of a policy developing level as well too. Talk a little bit about that, because there are some ceilings to break through and some stigmas and barriers at that level. What's been your experience or level of reception in those places?
Well, I've definitely done some legislative advocacy. I went to Sacramento in I think late June to talk about SB 614, which is a Senate bill which tries to help peers as in called consumer clients or patients who receive mental health services. And so those individuals who have already navigated the mental health care system have the experience to be able to help new mental health clients navigate the system.
And presumably would be understanding of someone else dealing with something similar because they've been through it.
And so that bill would help the peers, consumer clients. I use all three words because people use different words for patients receiving mental health services, to get jobs, they don't have to go get their master's in social work. They don't have to go get, their PsyD or their PhD to become a therapist or psychiatrist to be a part of the mental health care system. And this is a very fairly newer position in the mental health care system.
Right.
Some of them act as healthcare navigators, so helping mental health care clients get linked to services that they weren't before. And then the other things that I do on the state level advocacy is going to meetings for the MHSOAC. MHSOAC stands for Mental Health Services Oversight and Accountability Commission. And they're the ones who are behind Proposition 63, the Mental Health Services Act, and trying to provide funds for counties to provide those mental health services for those who are in need of them.
Yeah.
And so many, through those funds, I was able to be interviewed by CalMesa's Each My Matters movement.
Yes.
And they had discovered my story through LA County Department of Health and interviewed me for a PSA in May of 2014.
Right.
And so I was so happy that they wanted to see, share my story.
Yeah.
Because, for little Emily, that's so exciting because it's like, wow, someone wants to know my story? Like, really? Yeah. My voice matters.
Yes.
And so
Asian Erin Brockovich for mental health. There we go.
Yeah. And so that was such a dream come true for that to happen. And yeah, so ever since then, things, I've been a mover and a shaker, and sometimes it does feel like a lonely road, but when I remember that there are other advocates with me, alongside with me, who are trying to go up this uphill battle, it makes me feel like I'm not alone, and yeah.
You talk about funding and the cost of resources and treatment for mental health. You and I had this conversation too, because most of my network and where I practice is in the private realm. And this is always a dilemma if we're not working in a community setting, at least primarily. And it's like, it's on one hand, well, our training and experience it's a long road and a big investment, and we have to have loans to pay off and all that. So it's sort of like we're not able to survive unless we charge a certain kind of fee. At the same time, it's like, well, we also obviously we're in a helping profession because we want to help people in need, and it sort of feels like we can get pinched on both sides. If you're as your consumer or client, if I'm not completely despondent, I don't qualify for Medi-Cal, but at the same time, I can't afford to pay privately for psychotherapy, right? And on the other hand, as for us, it's like, well, we'd love to be able to help people where we know that there's great needs for as well, but it's just not feasible. And then the insurance companies kind of supposedly fill in the gap. And
insurance companies.
You just rolled your eyes again. So it's a broken system in many ways, and I'm glad there's people out there like you trying to at least keep the conversation going. How can professionals, therapists, psychologists, people practicing across settings, how else other than being providers and clinicians partner with people like you who are speaking, advocating at the legislative level, or just out there debunking stigma? How else do you see those partnerships being able to form?
I think the partnerships can form when we start to listen to each other. Because all of us come from different perspectives, backgrounds, even cultural backgrounds. And so just having that open-mindedness to be able to hear what other people are going through is what will help to make the bridge happen.
Yeah.
the collaboration to happen. And, take away this whole attitude of us versus them, or, oh, they're trying to do my job for me, or, just trying to open your eyes to seeing what other people are seeing, because sometimes mental health professionals may only be looking at the symptoms. Like, for example, psychiatrists, they're taught to just look at symptoms to figure out, oh, this is what I should prescribe you, But then let's look at the whole picture, right? And sometimes, yes, it does take a long time to see the whole picture. Because, when you get to know somebody,
For sure.
you learn little bits and bits about a person each time, right? And so
I think some psychiatrists do a good job of that, more so than others, perhaps. But yeah, there are some where that's the experience. And when I'm involved in NAMI, family members are also a very important part of the picture too, because sometimes they are the caregivers and they worry about their loved ones who are diagnosed with mental illness. Yeah.
I think it's this idea of partnership and collaboration is so important, because it's not just about the patients with mental illness. It's about our community.
For sure.
It's about everyone. And the more open-minded we are to hearing each other out, the more we can learn about how we can what are our universal values to being able to collaborate. And language is so important as well. Like when journalists, right, are talking about mental illness, they're always saying the mentally ill, unlike as if that those people are defined by their mental illness.
Again, us versus them in a different kind of way.
I mean, in psychology, even how psychology is taught. Abnormal psychology happens to those people with those deviant behaviors, disorders. It's the way we talk about it.
It's very subtle in some ways too.
Yeah, because when I took psychology and social behavior at UC Irvine, they didn't tell you that this could happen to you. And
it's out there. It's on a textbook.
Yeah.
Right. They're case studies. Somebody
all
out there.
These theories, blah, blah, blah. Not bringing it down to earth.
Or bringing it very close to home. Yeah, this could be any of you and probably will be at some point. Something will be.
Unless we talk about those coping skills. Because also everyone needs to talk about healthy coping skills. Our society is full of so many unhealthy coping skills, addictions to drugs, alcoholism, just so many types of unhealthy coping skills that we need to start replacing those with healthier ones. And if we could get them into the schools,
Whoa, get a nerve there.
Then the kids will learn it at an earlier age, and that would be the prevention and early intervention.
I think, a lot of what you're talking about too is, it's not that alcohol or even gambling or whatever it is it's bad in of itself, but any of those things can be distorted into something that becomes unhealthy at an extreme level, right?
Right.
And okay, well, they have DARE and those programs that just say no to drugs, but I don't know the status of those programs these days and the sophistication with which they are presented.
Well, DARE helped me.
Did it? Okay.
Yeah, I was like, okay.
So there's a positive example.
Yeah, because when I was a kid, I believed that stories, like fables, right? Fables always tell you there's a moral to the story, so don't blah blah blah. So I followed those.
In that sense, you were a good Taiwanese kid.
Yes. Yeah.
talk about briefly a story or an incident in which your efforts and your energy and your story as an advocate really had a visible or tangible impact in a place or on a person?
Well, another advocate from San Marino, her name is Avni Parikh. And, she graduated not too long ago from San Marino High. And she said that if she had not seen that video that Each Mind Matters made, she would have literally wanted to kill herself.
Wow.
But she's alive today, and I'm happy about that.
Glad to hear.
She has done amazing things. She's figured out how to go to, Sacramento to even speak on behalf to support a bill. Can't remember the name of the bill, but for Senator Kevin De Leon to bring in education around sexual assault into high schools.
So again, channeling suffering towards something positive, and you had something to do with that. It's a good feeling.
It is.
Yeah.
It really is.
And of course, with all the transformation that you've been through and coping skills that you've developed and finding your own voice, you never have any feelings of depression or anxiety anymore, right? That's the end of the story. Everything's perfect now,
That's
right?
not true. No. I still
Obviously,
have
I say that in jest, but yes.
I still have my dark days. And, part of it is just like when I get so consumed with mental health advocacy, yes, I do get emotionally triggered sometimes because it taps into my feelings of helplessness and hopelessness. But it's when I focus too much on what's going wrong in our society that my brain can start to feel like go back into victim mentality and like, oh, why do I even bother? Why do I even try?
Yeah.
I try so hard to keep on hitting this like invisible glass ceiling that I want to surpass, but I can't get past it. But I tell myself, I can't give up. I can't give up. And I have to zoom out of those problems of our society and say, like, not everything is so bad. You have really good friends who support you in your work. They tell you keep on going. You're an inspiration. And even going to recovery international support group meetings have helped me too, because they teach you endorse yourself for the effort and not just for the performance.
Or the outcome. Yeah, sure.
So kind of like patting yourself on the back for each step forward you've made.
Well, I think sometimes we don't always know what the outcome or effect of our actions are in the moment because you just don't see it, or someone doesn't say it, or it's planting a seed that doesn't germinate until later on. Yeah, like, therapy is similar.
Yeah. Like we don't see the ripple effects always.
Yeah,
but it does make a positive difference in our communities.
How will you know when your work is done?
It will never be done.
Well, let me phrase it differently. What are there measurable or tangible goals or just markers or things that you really feel good about or like to see at some point sooner rather than later, perhaps, in some part due to your efforts?
I'd like to see more support groups in schools.
Yeah.
So that students know that there is a safe space at school where they can openly talk about how they're feeling. Because if they never get to talk about that side of themselves, they'll never be able to really explore it. And they'll never be exploring it even after they finish school. And, because our society has already taught us, suck it up, be a, for men, it's like, be a man, man up, don't be a sissy, don't show emotion. Asian culture, save face. Don't share your problems with anyone, or else you bring shame to yourself and the family. And so, that's where it's really important for us to break that cycle.
Yep.
and provide those safe spaces for the younger generation. And for the older generation, we just need to keep on breaking that stigma for them, so that they know that they're not alone in their struggles, and you don't have to keep on faking it. And, everyone's going through some kind of struggles,
whether you see it on the outside or not.
Mm-hmm.
You and I talked about it, how invisible any mental health issue or mental illness can be.
Mm-hmm.
You don't, if someone's, visibly depressed or, talking to themselves on the street or something, sometimes, maybe you might see a symptom that's more visible, but a lot of times someone could have a smile on their face, be going about their business. You have no idea they're dealing with alcoholism or an anxiety disorder or whatnot. So it's,
right.
I'm with you. The more openness, the better, and I hope that pervades culture more.
Yeah. Actually, I kind of wonder, if there are any documents from Martin Luther King Jr. or even Gandhi. I think Gandhi has at least been diagnosed with something. I forget what it was, but
Mother Teresa.
Yeah. I mean, as an activist, you're a mover and a shaker, but when you also hit those invisible glass ceilings, I'm sure they also dealt with some frustrations too.
Well, and when you are driven by an ideal that's
Mm-hmm.
not realized yet,
Mm-hmm.
Every day can be, even if you're passionate and courageous about it, you're on the front lines of hitting against the reality and the barriers, yeah.
Because you're challenging the status quo, and oftentimes people are not ready to change with you.
If I could highlight what I hear as a major theme in your both personal story, but obviously that it's interwoven into what you do professionally, you said a number of times, both for yourself and other people you talked about, but it's channeling our struggles and suffering and setbacks into something positive. Pushing through something difficult and using that energy or that hardship or that experience towards something that is positive or that benefits other people. And I commend you for doing that.
Thank you.
I think, it's definitely easier said than done.
Right.
And I hope other people can hear that. Whether they are, explicitly mental health advocates or not themselves, and whatever it is people are dealing with in life, there are setbacks, big and small, however measurable. And being resilient, there's no course in that. Life is the course in that. Take home message, just for people listening, in your own words, Emily.
Martin Luther King Jr. said something about always having an attitude of forgiving. And it's like sometimes when we're our own worst enemy, we are not so forgiving.
Of ourselves.
Yeah. And so that's where we have to learn to forgive ourselves. We can't beat ourselves on the back, on the head, for not knowing what we didn't know before. And so we also have to learn how to not live with regret either, because our past has shaped us into becoming the person we are today.
Absolutely.
And so instead of internalizing the pain from the past and repressing those skeletons in our closet, we need to embrace our skeletons, look at them, and say, I accept you because you are a part of me and you don't hurt anymore. And I think that's one of the biggest steps to healing ourselves and not being ashamed of who we are.
Mm-hmm.
That's the most wonderful thing about mental health and confronting ourselves. That's what I feel like mental health therapy is all about.
I was going to say, that sounds like a good therapist message there, too.
So, yeah. It's like, tell your story so much to the point where it's not something you can be ashamed of, because you love how you have been able to, you love your growth.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a part of you. You start to own it, and you stop blaming any other people, and you also forgive them. And forgiving is such a powerful act of love.
Indeed.
So.
The love revolution, as you've called
Yes.
the mental health movement.
Yes.
That's not just hippies and daisies. That's love, forgiveness, and openness with our skeletons, and hopefully sharing your story, and as well as just fighting at the various levels that you are, that helps more people to feel free to do that.
Right.
More open to do that.
Yeah.
So,
because being able to confront ourselves actually is a self-actualization and self-discovery process.
Indeed. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for your efforts.
Thank you.
For sharing personally, in both here with me today and in all the settings that you're doing that.
Thank
and
you.
I know all the work that you are up to. I can see that, and that's a lot. And I'm grateful that we can collaborate at least in this way, and we'll find other ways to do that.
Yes, I'd love to.
Are there... First of all, I'll say this. If you Google Emily Wu Truong, you'll get about 10 pages of links, interviews, videos, blogs, all sorts of stuff that she's written. But are there particular links or resources that you just like to highlight for our audience?
Well, I recently did a video with Sunny Ader, from a filmmaker from Texas, and it's one of the last videos pinned on my Facebook page, facebook.com/MLEWU, W-U. And it's about, about a 3.5 minute video. And both Sunny and I worked on it. And it has a very heartfelt message, because it's the older sister Emily talking to younger sister Emily.
Yeah.
And me thanking myself for being able to, stick it out for the long haul and not giving up on me. So, yeah, suicide prevention work is very important to me.
And this is Suicide Awareness Month, are we not? Or are we getting into it here?
No, September is Suicide Prevention Awareness
Here
Month.
we are. So check it out, facebook.com/MLE.
W-U.
Emily, thanks for your time.
Thank
For
you.
sharing. All right. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And that's Emily Wu Truong, another brave person who has been through hardship, been tested, and strengthened by her struggles, and now is also brave enough to share openly here on Psych Rally. Again, there have certainly been moments along her journey, you heard, her journey to date, when things could have gone to a darker place, and but you hear how she's been pushing through and is using those experiences to bring hope and inspiration to others. So I am glad there are people like her out there. So far on this podcast, we've touched on it, but not really gone in depth into the reality that there is a culture about mental health issues within each culture. And obviously for Emily and for me, it's certainly close to my heart for the Chinese and Taiwanese American and broader Asian American community, that there can really be a certain level or type of stigma around things like depression, and definitely seeing a therapist. And it's not always understood or appreciated or even supported. And Emily's experience and presence is certainly a force for addressing this and trying to open minds about this. Bridging understanding across generations is tough enough, but you throw in a major cultural nuance. For immigrant parents and their kids being raised in the U.S., possibly a language barrier, it can be even more challenging. And there can be two completely different paradigms about what it means for a young person to grow up and thrive and succeed beyond academics and what the measure of quote-unquote success is. And how we're to cope with the challenges that life brings. I recently spoke with another colleague who gave a presentation about developing social skills and emotional intelligence, or EQ, among kids and teenagers. And this was before a very well-attended crowd of primarily immigrant Asian parents. And she was saying how pleasantly surprised she was at the turnout for such an event and what appeared to be a very well-engaged audience. People seem to get that emotional intelligence, or EQ, is just as important as IQ and grades and traditional academic measures. And that gave my colleague a lot of hope that some of these parents were beginning to have a shift towards a more, psychological mindset, for lack of a better term. A more psychological mindset about parenting and about their kids' well-being and development, but that later on, most of the follow-up calls she received were still focused on grades. So what you were talking about in your presentation, that will help my son, get better grades and get into a good school, right? Was sort of the gist of the feedback. And my colleague, as she was telling me the story, we both had this wincing face like, I think you just missed the point a little bit there. So this is not an easy fix, and I certainly see it as a mental health issue. And what Emily shared here today supports that. And these are conversations that need to be had in more places and with more voices. So thank you for listening and supporting Psych Rally by subscribing, rating, and reviewing on iTunes, sharing clips and episodes on social media, and doing your routine shopping at no extra cost on Amazon.com via the book links on PsychRallyPodcast.com. Thanks for tuning in, and see you on episode 13.